Hello again, everyone. This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports, and we're here to talk about the passing of the great New York Ranger winger, Rod Gilbert. Gilbert passed away last night at the age of 80. No cause of death has been given yet, but we wanted to get right to his career and also what he did after his career, which was also important in the New York area. So it's hard to believe that Rod Gilbert was a young junior player, grew up in Montreal, idolized Boom Boom Geoffrion for you old timers. Of course, Geoffrion was a right winger for the Canadians, and Gilbert was a right-handed shot like Geoffrion and became a right winger for the New York Rangers. But when he was first called up, actually during the 1959-1960 minor league hockey season, some fans threw some stuff on the ice and he tripped over. Some people said it was a penny. Some people said it was something else. But he tripped over something, went into the boards head first, fractured his back, and actually needs spinal fusion, a tough surgery in 1959, 1960, a tough surgery today. But he needed that before he ever played in the NHL. But eventually he was called up. He did play. He played very well. The Rangers were not very good in the early 60s. You old timers will know that. They usually fought the Bruins for fifth place, and the other four teams always made the playoffs. If the Rangers came in fifth and the Bruins came in sixth, Ranger fans were like, yeah, well, at least we didn't come in last. But Gilbert was one of the main guys, if not the main guy, to turn that around. But before that happened, he had to have a second spinal fusion operation. And I just want to read you a quote from Rod Gilbert himself years ago. And what happened was the graft that you have to do for spinal fusion, that part of the bone broke off. And apparently this was a life and death kind of operation. And here's what Gilbert said. I'll give you the quote after I give you the intro. However, Gilbert's rise to stardom was countered with a final setback, one which almost cost him his life. The bone graft from Gilbert's first spinal fusion broke, and a second operation needed to be performed. When Rod was on the operating table, he says he had an out-of-body experience. Here's Gilbert's quote about that time. I went out. I died, Gilbert said. When I was out, I heard Francis, Emile Francis, the coach of the Rangers at the time, I heard Francis, who was in the operating room, tell the nurse, bring him back. He's my best player. The fact that Emile used those words towards the nurse offered me a reason to come back into my body. Now that's pretty serious, and that's kind of one of those out-of-body life and death experiences you hear about. So he only played 34 games in that year. He had pretty much been playing every game, which again, an incredible accomplishment with one spinal fusion surgery. Now he was playing with two, and then he became a superstar. His numbers went off the charts. Eventually, many of you guys know he teamed up with Gene Rattel in the middle, Vic Hadfield on the left wing. The highlight of their career together, they were called the gag line, goal a game line. And of course, in 71, 72, you old-time Ranger fans will remember, the Rangers were great. Rattel was leading the league in scoring. It would turn out that this would be the first line in the history of hockey to have three guys with more than 40 goals. And I'm going to guess all three of them scored over 100 points. So I'm going to guess the first line that had three guys with over 100 points in the season. And back then, these numbers were like almost unheard of. So I just wrote down the goals numbers for that year because you probably know what happened, but I'll tell you. So Gilbert had 43 goals, Rattel had 46, and Vic Hadfield became the first 50-goal scorer for the New York Rangers. So they actually scored almost 2 goals a game, but you get the point. Even a goal a game back then was a big deal. But Rattel got hurt. Many of you know he broke his ankle on March 1st, 72, missed the last 15 games of the season. The Rangers got to the finals against the Bruins without Rattel, amazing. And Rattel fought back to play, but he was not Gene Rattel. He had, I think 1 assist in 6 games. And of course, those were the Bobby Orr days for the Bruins, and they won the cup. But Gilbert stayed on. He was a superstar for the next 6-7 years. He retired with 406 goals, the all-time leading Ranger goal scorer. and 1,021 points, the all-time leading Ranger point getter. He was second in assists with 615 to Brian Leach. And his numbers even today still stack up pretty well against guys. For example, he's in the top 100 all time in things like points per game. He had 0.96 points per game. Back then, a point a game was like incredible. And when he came into the league, 20 goals in a year in a season was incredible. You were a really good offensive player if you scored 20 goals. Then expansion came, everybody's numbers went up, including Gilberts. But to this day, he's the all-time leading scorer, goal scorer, and points scorer for the New York Rangers in their illustrious now almost 100-year history. But Gilbert stuck around New York after he retired, and he became really a big-time celebrity in New York. He did a ton of charity work. He was always out and about. He worked for the Rangers for about 30 years in kind of a Mr. Ranger capacity. He went to tons of charity events. I think the biggest one, certainly that I'm aware of, is he was on the board of Ronald McDonald House in New York. And if you guys know what the Ronald McDonald House does with the families of kids who have cancer and how they put them up, Rod Gilbert was on the board, as was his wife. And they really did contribute a lot. There's a lot more than that. He did a ton of things around the Garden. You could see him at the Garden. If you went to hockey games in the 80s and the 90s into the 2000s, he was off the moon happy when the Rangers won the Stanley Cup in 1994. But to me, looking back on his career, the most incredible thing is, again, to survive not one, but two spinal fusion surgeries, one in 1960, the other in 1965, to have literally a life and death experience in 1965. And after that, still became a superstar who was a productive, after that operation, was productive for another 13 seasons from 65 to 78. So he never got the Stanley Cup. He was elected to the Hall of Fame, and rightfully so, in 1982. He had to wait 3 years after he retired to get into the Hall of Fame, and he got in, and deservedly so. The Hatfield, Rattel, Gilbert goal a game line is one of the greatest lines in Ranger history, and arguably one of the greatest lines in the history of hockey, because again, the first time where three guys on the same line scored more than 40 goals. And I'm willing, I found that in research, but I'm also willing to wager that they're also the first line to have all three guys with more than 100 points. I haven't confirmed that yet, though. But a very sad day. But, you know, he passed away at 80, was around till recently, was always kind of around the New York area, had a tremendous career as a Ranger, both on the ice and off the ice. So Rod Gilbert will be missed. He helped a lot of the younger Rangers when they were coming up. They always went to him for advice, both when he was playing and after he retired. So he really had a tremendous effect on the Rangers for 50 years easily, maybe even a little more. So he'll be sorely missed on a number of levels. But the late, great Rod Gilbert, dead at the age of 80. We'll see you the next time.